Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Pascale, and if I can, there's a big picture of my face in case you can't see me clearly enough here. But I am the senior campaigner at Change.org in the UK, so I lead our campaigns team. We have a whole team of 6 people in the UK responsible for Change.org. We're the largest online petition platform, and I'll talk a bit more about it in a minute. But just to tell you briefly about me, I kind of have been working at the intersect between kind of like storytelling and social change. So I started off kind of doing like local journalism stuff, like on the ground investigations, and then moved into helping people to see how they could use the internet to tell their stories, helping people to produce TED Talks, and then don't like hold my speaking as a count of like a TED Talk. Some people are better at telling people what to do than speaking myself, but let's see how this goes. And then I tried working briefly in government, and then decided I would rather campaign outside of government than work within it. And that's how I ended up at Change.org. And I've been working for the last 4 years, basically helping people that start petitions to raise their voices effectively and turn their petitions into really effective campaigns that create change. How many of you have heard of Change.org? Can I have a raise of hands? Oh, cool, that's good. And how many of you have signed a petition? Great, that's amazing. We are an online petition platform. We're an open platform, so we basically allow anyone who has access to the internet and a story to tell to start a campaign about the thing that matters to them. Which is one of the reasons why I think that what we're going to be talking about later today is so important, because the more people that we can get on the internet, the more people that we can have really raising and telling their own stories. The idea is essentially to allow that it shouldn't be just a small group of people, that a privileged few in rooms that make the big decisions about everyone's lives. And that real people with real experiences should be able to raise their voices, have them heard, and have them accounted for, and be in those conversations about important decisions. We were launched in 2007. Actually, to begin with, as kind of like a platform that was like a blogging platform, and there were lots of different things that you could do on it to try and make social change, and it didn't really work that well. But then a woman in South Africa actually hacked the platform and used it to start a petition, because she had a friend who had suffered from a horrible thing called corrective rape. And so she wanted to basically make that illegal. And so she told her friend's story, and she started a petition, and within a week it had over 100,000 signatures. People from across the world trying to raise this woman's voice, and it helped to shape legislation. And that's when our founder and CEO was like, this is the way that we need to be taking the platform. This is what people want and need. And so we pivoted and became a petition platform. And we now have 250 million people who have signed a petition worldwide. We're sustained by 100,000 members who subscribe to keep us going. We have 1 in 5 people in the UK who are currently signing petitions. We now have every hour somewhere in the world someone declares victory on a campaign. And those things are across all sorts of different issues. Like I said, you can start a petition on basically anything, as long as it doesn't go against our terms of service. So that's everything from Laura Corrigan, who launched a campaign to end the tampon tax in the UK, to a boy in Bradford that wanted to be ungrounded so that he could go to a party. We are just like Change.org basically came about in a time where the internet has really been changing the way that campaigning can look. There was up until recently, a lot of the big campaigns that were really effective were often run by institutional, old, large organizations, and they were largely very top down. But as the internet has emerged, it's allowed people that traditionally didn't necessarily have weren't able to have their voices heard by a lot of people, had a slightly more even playing field. And so people were able to communicate in lots of different ways. And so what we've seen now is that a lot of the most interesting, exciting, and effective campaigns are largely like grassroots. So campaigns like Black Lives Matter, Me Too, these are campaigns that aren't like, Greenpeace's campaign or Amnesty International's campaign. Even though they've been endorsed by large organizations, they might have big supporters, they're campaigns that a lot of people feel ownership over. And they are campaigns that are largely led by real people with real lived experiences telling their stories. And so Change.org has kind of, I think, helped to shape that and also come out of that whole change that's been taking place. So I want to give you a bit of an example of how the platform can be used. So a lot of people sign petitions and they often wonder, but what happens after I sign? Is this just clicktivism? What does it really mean? So I think that Sasha's story here is a really great example of how people are using the platform to really make disruptive change. So Sasha is a 32-year-old mum. She's got 2 kids, and unfortunately, in 2015, she was diagnosed with leukemia. She got a stem cell transplant and went into remission, but unfortunately, 2 years later, her cancer came back. When she went to her doctor's appointment, she thought she'd be able to try getting a stem cell transplant again, and she was told that recently the law had been changed, which meant that you could only now have 1 stem cell transplant on the NHS, and after that you would have to pay for it privately, and that law had come into effect a month before. So Sasha had an amazing friend, Amy, and a lot of other members of her community that really rallied around her and were like, we need to do something to help her and other people like her who were in this position. So Amy and a few other members of their local community got together, Amy's her best friend, and they started a petition. And they got 168,000 signatures, starting with people in the local community. They shared it and got more and more, and eventually they managed to change the law. But there were actually a lot of things that went into those signatures and phases that happened in between the signing and the winning. So this is them after they just won their campaign. That's Amy on the end. That's their local MP. That's Sasha in the middle. So one thing that they did is after people started to sign the petition, those signers helped to encourage a local charity, Anthony Nolan, to get behind the campaign. So Anthony Nolan felt that there probably wasn't, and they'd looked at this issue and they felt there was probably not enough public support or enough support from Parliament for them to stop this law from coming into effect. But then once they'd seen that 168,000 people had signed the petition, they started to take new note. And that was amplified by the fact that people that were seeing the campaign online were getting in touch with Anthony Nolan, and they said that they were overwhelmed by phone calls from people asking them about this issue. And they obviously have a infrastructure and lobbying abilities that Amy and Sasha didn't have, and contacts with MPs, and so they were able to work together to start to get more people in Parliament on board with trying to change the law. Also, on Change.org, we basically have a feature which allows people who have signed a petition, if you've started the petition, you can send updates which get emailed to the people that have signed. And that is like an amazing mobilizing tool. So Amy wrote to her signers and asked them to meet with MPs, write to them and convince them to attend debates that they managed to get on this issue. Loads of MPs turned up to events in Parliament, to the debates, and they said that the reason that they'd come is because so many people in their constituencies had got in touch with them about the issue. Finally, they crowdfunded. So Amy also used the update tool to get in touch with her supporters and ask them to help to fundraise so that Sasha could get the treatment even if the law wasn't going to be changed, because they didn't know if Sasha was going to make it. They managed to raise £150,000, not just through direct crowdfunding. They also sent out packs to people so that people in their local communities could do like bake sales, and they could do various different crowdfunding initiatives, and they raised the money so that Sasha could get the treatment. And Sasha's doing really well now, and she's get to see her kids go to secondary school, which she wasn't sure she was going to be able to do, which is amazing. And the law's been changed back now, so that's great. I don't think that necessarily, weird for a person for Change.org to say, but a petition is the right tool for kind of like all campaigns or all works for social change. But there are some ways in which it can be super, super effective. One is that it is a really, really great way to allow you to reach more supporters if you are kind of like launching a campaign or an initiative. People love something to sign up to. If you are on like Change.org, for example, we have a lot of tools trying to help people to find as many supporters as possible, and tests that we're running all the time to try and improve that. It's also a great way to get the attention of the press. If you are kind of launching a campaign, the press loves something to hook that off of, and having a number of signatures to show that there's a certain amount of public feeling is a really great way to do that. Journalists actually go onto our site every single day to look for new stories to write about, because they're also looking for things to write about. And we're looking into at some point like creating a feature that makes it more accessible for them to kind of like look through the things that will be interesting and relevant to them. It's also a really good way to get the attention of your decision maker if you are trying to change something. One thing that we do is that people can put an email address in the back of a petition which notifies the decision maker that someone started a campaign against them, or to try and talk to them. You can use the update tool really effectively to come up with lots of interesting and effective techniques to get decision makers to pay attention. We've also, because we're trying to allow and facilitate better dialogue between decision makers and people that are kind of starting campaigns, we have a tool which means that decision makers can start profiles and they can respond directly to petitions that have been started, and that way they get emailed out to everyone that's signed. So it's a really effective way for them to get in contact with lots of people about an issue. So we actually have the Mayor of London responding to campaigns every single week, which is really great. And it provides a great focal point for people's campaigns, because often there are so many different things going on in different places, and having a space and a page where you can communicate directly with people through those updates gives people a sense of what's going on and is a really effective way to community build. I'm not going to talk for too long, but I'm going to give you a few of the secrets to what we see working most effectively on the platform. And because we often get asked, okay, but what is it that separates, a viral campaign or whatever from one that only gets 5 signatures? So the one thing that we see work the most and most frequently is when people have a clear, tangible ask for what they want to achieve. Making change can feel like, often we have very big things that we want to try and change and make better in the world, but sometimes they can feel very overwhelming and can be difficult for people to understand, like, where would their signature go, or how long would they be fighting for this, or it can feel impossible. So if you have an ask which is like clear and tangible and feels achievable to people, they're more likely to kind of sign up to it, get behind it, and you're more likely to win. So Caroline Corrado Perez, I think, is a great example of this. She started a petition a few years ago. So basically, Caroline's thing at the time was that she felt that Britain wasn't recognising women in history on an equal footing to that of men. And she was looking around and seeing all these problems and places where women weren't being recognised. But asking for that broadly is very untangible and difficult for people to grasp, and it's like a long, long change. The one thing that she saw first that she thought that she could make happen was that the banknotes were about to get reproduced, and there wasn't going to be a woman that was featured. So she started a petition to get a woman featured on the banknotes. She got 30,000 signatures, and now we have Jane Austen on the £10 note. And so then after that, she brought people on this journey, and they could see that change was possible. And then the next thing that she saw was that in Parliament Square, there were no statues of women. And so she started a petition to get a statue of a suffragette in Parliament Square. And that got even more support and she referenced what she was able to do before, and people were able to see this next step and this next process of change. That got even more support, and that statue went up earlier this year. I think that one example that people will know quite clearly from, I think, campaigning is like everyone's heard about the plastic straws stuff and like campaigning to get rid of plastic straws. And there are some things that there are a lot of like debates about whether this is the most effective place for people to be campaigning. But I think what was really good about it is that like it was a first step it was a very tangible thing that people could see in their day-to-day lives or in their shops. And it was like a first step to making change on that much bigger issue of plastic pollution. And it brought a lot of people that hadn't thought about it before on board with with making change. And we saw loads of petitions started from 8-year-olds asking their local Wetherspoons to stop stocking plastic straws and winning, to people that got Tesco to stop stocking them, and lots of things in between. Cool. And then, so personal story and authenticity. I think that there's a tendency when people start running campaigns to sometimes feel like they need to, particularly I see grassroots groups do this all the time, is feel like they need to seem very, very professional. But really what translates best online is when we can kind of, and I think in life, is when we sense a sense of kind of like authenticity to what someone's saying, and can like empathize with them. And so having like a personal story and speaking authentically really works. So I think that if an organization was running, for example, Amy's campaign, they might have taken out some of the exclamation marks, but things like those exclamation marks and the little like typos that she would have, like I actually fostered a really strong relationship between the people that had signed up to her petition, encouraged people to support her and feel connected to that journey. So I think another great example of this, I don't actually have a picture of him, but there's a guy called Luke that was best friends with someone called Brian. And Brian, due to a Home Office error, was going to be deported and unable to take his place at Oxford University. And Luke started a petition to save his friend. And Luke wrote this beautiful petition text where he said, like, my best friend is going to be deported, and explained why his friend needed to stay. And people really empathized with that personal story, and then were able to kind of like come on that journey and really feel like enthused and like they needed to do something to save Brian. And through that, engaged with the wider issue of what was going on with kind of like the Home Office and immigration and issues to do with that. I always think this is an interesting example as well. So we were working on a campaign with a guy called Matthew, and Matthew lost his brother to suicide and was calling for a government minister to have suicide prevention as something that they were responsible for. And a lot of the people working with Matthew tried coming up with very fancy, like, designs and pictures like this with lots of statistics, but the things that really translated the best when we came to kind of like showing the petition to people were about 5 times more likely to sign the grainy picture of him and his brother than they were of the picture that they'd spent hours producing with statistics and graphics. And that's because people always respond better to these grainy pictures that they can relate to than to things that feel like overproduced and slightly more organizational. And then the third thing is community building. Yeah, petitions are rarely like won just on the signatures themselves. A lot of what comes down to kind of like making a really effective campaign is when people really utilize the update tool or use various different things to kind of turn those signers into supporters and really like are like an army for a campaign. So for example, with this campaign, they spent a lot of time writing to their supporters and encouraging them to do all sorts of actions, like respond to consultations, to get involved in a Facebook group, to share articles. And sometimes they would just write to them and like tell them about their day or their week. And those things made a sense of community amongst the people that had supported their campaign. The person that I still feel is doing this the most effectively on the platform is Richard Ratcliffe. You might have seen his story in the news. His wife, Nazanin, is a British-Iranian citizen who was on holiday with her daughter and was arrested. And she's been in jail in Iran for 2.5 years. And like it's widely been regarded as an arbitrary detention. Richard started a petition on the platform as soon as his wife was imprisoned. And he, although Nazanin is still in jail, he's really done a lot in order to make the government that weren't speaking out about it speak out about it. Jeremy Hunt just went to Iran to push for his wife's release, and she's been an international news story. And the way that Richard has largely done this is by the way in which he's built a community on the platform. So he writes these incredibly moving updates where he tells people about the days since his wife has last been with him, shares stories of them, and then also gives people ways to feel really a part of this campaign. So every time, and that's not just allowed people to want to talk about it with their friends, it's allowed journalists to really connect with him and write about his story as well. And every time his wife is out of the news, he comes up with a new way and like brings his community to come up with ideas to kind of make change happen, from getting people to write cards, birthday cards for his daughter, which they left on the steps of the Iranian embassy, to creating a joke book for Nazanin, who loves jokes, to keep her going, to writing small wishes, which they tied to the tree that was their favorite tree in their local community. And these kind of steps not only allow the news to keep writing about it, allowing politicians to keep speaking about it, but they also actually create ways for him and his wife to keep going. He said that every comment that he sees left for him underneath his petition, everyone that takes part and leaves jokes, is something that gives him and Nazanin the strength to keep going. Yeah, just finally, I would say that when it comes to petitions, particularly on change.org, numbers are good, but it's not all about the numbers. It's really about what you do with them. And I think what we've seen most amazingly happen on the platform is people from like their local communities like coming together, finding support, and like building actions to make change happen. Thank you very much.